Put your hands together for Lynne McTaggart.
Thank you. Thank you, Magali. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry, I'm just waking up, so I've got my tea. Thank you very much for being here. Everybody in their seats at 9 o'clock. That is wonderful. Give yourself a round of applause for being on time. Thank you. Now, for those of you who don't know me, and most people know me in this country for what doctors don't tell you, I've got another little hat that I wear. And that came about from What Doctors Don't Tell You because in my work, looking at the medical literature and finding out, sifting out what works and what doesn't work in conventional medicine, I kept coming across these amazing studies that didn't fit. Studies of things like spiritual healing or acupuncture. And I kept thinking to myself, if you can send a thought to somebody and make that person better, then this alone undermines everything we think about how the universe works. So that curiosity led me on a journey from around 1998 that I haven't stopped carrying on with. And that was really to try to find out if there's such a thing as energy fields in the body. And so I thought, well, I'll talk to a couple of scientists. They can tell me. I'll write it up. I'll collect my advance. No problem. What I didn't realize is what I was letting myself in for. I talked to a number of scientists, and what I soon realized is that each of them had discovered a tiny piece of a puzzle that adds up to a completely new paradigm of reality. That we are on the brink of a revolution in our understanding of how we work and how the universe works. And that first voyage led me to my first book in this area, The Field. But I had some unfinished business. And the main unfinished business was, well, if consciousness is so powerful, if thoughts have such an effect, and that was what they were really suggesting is thoughts are things, and not only things, but things that affect other things. So I kept wondering to myself, okay, so what do you do with this? And I also wanted to figure out, and that led me to the intention experiment, and finally I wanted to figure out, how do you live this? If we are on the brink of something radically new, everything we have created in our lives is based on science, because science writes the story we live by. And everything we understand about who we are determines how we live. And so that really led me to writing The Bond. But the intention experiment, which is what I'm going to be talking about today, which isn't just a book, it's an ongoing experiment based on my own curiosity. How far can we take this? But we got to start with the beginning, which is, what is intention? Because, this is bandied about so much. Intention. I'm going to do that with intention. Even Jane Fonda once talked about mothering with intention. What on earth is intention? And so I started thinking about some of the things that we think about intention. Now, a number of things come from popular movies like The Secret. Now, I'm not making fun of this because a lot of my good friends are in that movie. And indeed, they asked me to be in the movie. But I want you to just take what we think about intention from what the popular literature and culture tells us. So watch this. This is from The Secret.
You know, this secret gives you everything you want. Happiness, health, and wealth.
You can have, do, or be anything you want.
We can have whatever it is that we choose. I don't care how big it is.
What kind of a house do you want to live in?
Do you want to be a millionaire?
What kind of a business do you want to have?
Do you want more success?
What do you really want?
What do you really want? And this too from it. Oops. Hold on. Let's try it again.
And this is really fun. This is like having the universe as your catalog, and you flip through it and you go, well, I'd like to have this experience, and I'd like to have that product, and I'd like to have a person like that. It is you just placing your order with the universe. It's really that easy.
It's really that easy. And so what they're talking about is just this. And what we think about intention and the law of attraction. I want, I get. And what we have is a kind of self-oriented idea about intention. You know, think about our whole movement, self-help, all about fixing me, all about making things and getting things for me, you know, all about I, me, mine. So I had some questions about that. Is that the way it's supposed to work? Because I wanted to know, you know, well, first of all, what is intention? You know, and no one really does understand this power, although lots of people talk about it. But I had some other basic questions too. You know, is it just prayer? Are we just talking about prayer here? And I think we're not. I think there's a subtle distinction, but not huge. A subtle distinction. Prayer is oftentimes a supplication, which is, you know, thy will be done. God, you decide. I'll just sit back and take whatever you want for me. I think intention is much more about putting it out there as a request to the universe. But there are other aspects of it. And the other thing I wanted to think about was, wait a minute. What The Secret and lots of other things talk about is basically a master of the universe view of intention, which is my thoughts are the only ones that count. Everybody else is having thoughts all the time, right? But they don't count, only mine. The universe only hears mine. And the other thing we think about is attention is a power thought. You know, I get into my meditative state, I sit down, I think about what I want, I use it, I use my vision boards, et cetera, et cetera. I send that out, and that's the only thing the universe hears. You know, doesn't hear anything else, I think, for the rest of the day. Just hears that. So I started thinking about all of this. And first of all, I started thinking about, well, where are these thoughts that we're talking about? You know, where are they? What's happening to them? And how much of this is the universe hearing? And also, you know, does this accord in any way with the conventional view we have of science, which is basically that consciousness is the brain? You know, emotions are the brain, consciousness is the brain, and the brain has everything, our emotions, our feelings, our memory, et cetera, housed inside. So here's another real secret, which is no one really knows how powerful these thoughts are either. They don't know where they're coming from. They don't know how powerful they are. And that was another question of mine. How far can we take this? You know, I mean, if we're talking about something as powerful as the law of attraction, then what are we using it to get a new car or a diamond ring? Why are we using that? Why are we trivializing intention? Why are we not using it to cure cancer? Why are we not using it to fly? Why are we not using it to stop war and the catalog of suffering on the planet? So those are some of my big questions, and that's why I launched the intention experiment, because the biggest question of all that I had was, what happens if more than one person thinks the same thought at the same time? Does that magnify the effect? Now, I'll explain to you in a minute, and we're going to go back to it, but I want to talk to you a little bit about thoughts. The intention experiment is an ongoing experiment. I'm running it with scientists around the world. We set up specific targets in the laboratory or out in the field, and then I invite my readers from all over the world to take part in these intention experiments. And we usually send intention together over the internet. So that's what it is. More about that later. So, these are the 4 radical thoughts I want you to understand about thought. These are the 4 radical truths that have nothing to do with our usual conventional view. Number 1, thoughts are not neuronal firings. Thoughts are something much bigger than that. Secondly, thoughts are globally felt in your body. Thoughts are running through your body and coming from all over your body all the time. 3, thoughts are absolutely outrageous trespassers. And finally, your thoughts are a constant and usually unconscious broadcast. So the first idea to understand is thoughts aren't neuronal firings. Thoughts are light. Now, we know this from the amazing work of the late Fritz Albert Popp, who discovered something amazing when he was looking for a cure for cancer. He inadvertently discovered that light was coming out in a tiny dribble from all living things. And he tested it on everything from plants to little tiny fruit flies to big, full-fledged human beings. And he found that we're sending out a tiny current of light. That this light is coming from DNA, from our DNA, and this has been studied by 40 scientists around the world. Popp was a German physicist. You don't get more serious than that. And he discovered that this light was beaming out from our DNA, and even more amazingly, that it was like a global communication system in the body. He found if he put medicine on one part of the body, like your hand, the light would change there, but it would also change everywhere else. He also found that it is a communication system between other living things. We send out light, it's sent back synchronicitously. It's almost like we're having a conversation in light. So he also found that this light was some of the most well-ordered. It's a word in physics called coherent, which means very well-ordered and acting like one giant wave of light. So it's very, very powerful. He found that that was one of the most well-ordered kinds of light in nature. Now, we've actually seen this light. Dr. Gary Schwartz, who is a physicist, a psychologist at the University of Arizona, got hold of Popp had his own way of testing and monitoring this light, photon by photon. But Gary Schwartz used a camera that is used to photograph very faint light out in outer space. And he discovered that the light is, you can see the light emanating from living things. Have a look at this. This is a geranium leaf, just a little cut geranium leaf. And this over here is its biophoton emissions, as he called them. The light he called biophoton emissions. So it's like a little shadow of light. You even see it coming from healers. When healers are having a thought, when they're sending healing, out it comes out of their dominant hand. There's a big increase in light. And we found that in different ways, too. Dr. Konstantin Korotkov, who is a physicist in Russia, developed a system of exciting those photons so that he could measure them better, and then using a computerized system to extrapolate what exactly was going on by taking light readings from fingers. And here's an example of what it looks like using reconnective healers. When they're sending healing, the light changes. That's before, that's afterward. Before, afterward. So we can actually measure light. So we know that something in our thoughts is sending out light, and that light is changing with our thoughts. But we also know the thoughts are traveling everywhere through our body. Now, this is the only technical slide I'm going to show you. But this is a cell. And part of the scaffolding of this cell is a thing called a microtubule, which is like, it's like the skeleton of a shell, of a cell. It holds that cell together. And scientists used to always think that's the only thing it does. But a number of scientists in Japan and America are now coming to the conclusion that these are light pipes, that they are like an internet of the body, sending this light globally throughout the body. So the reason that this is important, and it may account for the kind of speed of our brains and how we can have these thoughts going so quickly. But here's the most interesting part of it, right here. This is a cell. That's the nucleus. That's the microtubule network. Think about this for a second. If those are all thoughts flooding through you via light, every single cell of your body is drenched in them, You are drowning in your own thoughts. You are drowning in your own thoughts. And we know that this is true because we know also that thoughts are one of our most powerful instructors. We know that our body, even though it's an amazing marvel, is just a little bit dumb, which is why I've got a little picture of Homer Simpson's brain there, because our bodies can't distinguish between an action and a thought. There was a wonderful study done by Cleveland Clinic to try to see if there was any difference between going to the gym and thinking about going to the gym. And so they took a bunch of people and they divided them in two groups, and they sent one to the gym to work on their biceps, and the others were just allowed to stay home, sit on their couch, be couch potatoes, and just think about going to the gym and working on their biceps. And so at the end of the study, they discovered that the people who had gone to the gym had increased their bicep size by 30%, but the people who had just thought about it, they increased their bicep size by 15%. So if you hate going to the gym, this is good news for you. You don't have to. You can just go home, watch TV tonight, sit in your sofas, and think about it. But that demonstrates how much our bodies are, how we're getting these kind of global instructions. We can't even distinguish between an action and a thought. Now, here's where it really gets interesting. Thoughts are not just staying inside you, because that is one of our typical ideas. We think about it, that thoughts are just, I think nobody else hears. But actually, your thoughts are terrible trespassers. First of all living things are hearing you all the time. And we know this, and I catalog this in my book, The Intention Experiment, from the work of Cleve Baxter. Now, Baxter was an expert in lie detection. Had nothing to do with studying this kind of stuff. But he was bored one night, and he was sitting there doing his work in his office, and he decided, and he had developed these lie detector equipment. This is back in the 1960s, when a lie detection was a set of electrodes that you would attach to your fingers, and it would have a readout with a pen moving in a wavy line. And it would go like this if you were telling the truth, but if the person said, if they said, were you the guy who shot John Smith? And he was, it would suddenly start doing that. So Baxter got the brainwave to attach this thing to one of his plants. And he said he wanted to find out what would happen when the plant, when he was going to water the plant. So he did this. And if the plant was a human being, the plant was actually registering boredom, water again. So what he did was he said, okay, I got to do something drastic. So he thought to himself, I think I'll burn its leaf. Now, the plant suddenly went mental. It started going like this. So Baxter thought to himself, oh my God, that plant has just read my thoughts. So he ran, he got the match, he was thinking about it, he lit the match, he didn't even burn the leaf of the plant, but the plant was going crazy until he blew out the match, put it away, plant calmed down again. So he said, what the hell was that? And for the next 40 years, he spent time trying to figure that out. And he attached all kinds of things. He attached eggs, and he would find that the eggs would react when one of their number was getting put into boiling water. He registered reactions from plants when hot water was poured down a sink and bacteria was killed. It was like, as he said, the plants had felt a disturbance in the force. But there was some sort of, but the thing that they were reacting to most of all were the thoughts of their people, of the people in their environment. They were registering their comings and goings. That's how much we trespass into other living things. We also know we can affect electronic equipment from the work of Robert John and Princeton University, where they carried out a very, very well-documented and rigorous study of whether or not people can affect equipment like computers. So what they did was create a thing called random event generators. You can tell this was done in the 1980s. Look at that monitor. But what they did was create basically an electronic toss of the coin. So this computer would show up flashing images of alternate images of, say, cowboys and Indians. And it would flash each kind of image about 50% of the time. 50% cowboys, 50% Indians. So Robert John, the Dean of Engineering who ran this program, would place his participants in front of the computer and have them will the machine to have more cowboys show than Indians show. And they ran this study hundreds and hundreds of thousands of times over a 25-year period. And this is what happened when they added up all of their results. An effect size is a rate of change that is used in medicine or in science to show how something's changed and whether there's been an effect. And they use it with drugs all the time, of course, to see if they work. Now, the effect size of all of the pair studies was 52%, meaning 52% as opposed to 50% total chance. That sounds like not much until you start comparing it to some of the best-selling drugs on the market, like beta blockers or even aspirin. Aspirin, one of the best-selling drugs of all time. If you look at aspirin's effect size, it is 10 times smaller than that. Your ability to affect equipment is extraordinary. You're beaming out all the time and you're affecting things, even the inanimate things around you. This is worrisome if you're a gremlin like me. I am, there's angels and gremlins when it comes to computers and things like that. I'm totally a gremlin. If I'm sick, all of my machines are sick too. One time I went and I was in a bad mood, which I'm not in often, and my computer stopped working. Then I went to another computer in my office. It stopped working. Then I went to my photocopier. It packed up. And at that point, my team said, get out of here. So come back when you're in a better mood. Now, one of the things that happens with brains is brains find other brains contagious. Minds find other minds contagious. They found this with brainwave studies of people, that when people send thoughts to each other, they oftentimes start entraining in synchrony. And by entrainment, I mean just this. Think of a pendulum. Now, suppose you've got two of them, and they're going like this. They've got a different kind of source of energy, but what happens with pendulums is they end up getting entrained. They end up going like this. And that's exactly what seems to happen with brainwaves. Brainwaves start operating in synchrony. But other parts of your body start operating in synchrony when you send thoughts to each other. And we know this from a really wonderful study done by the Institute of Noetic Sciences, when they were trying to see what happens in a bonded pair, like a married couple, when one has cancer and the other one sends intention to the ill partner to get better. And so they put them in two rooms. They had a batch of couples like this. They enlisted a batch of couples where one partner had cancer, took the cancer patient in one room and put a camera on him or her. In a totally other part of the building, they put his or her partner, and they did this in pairs, one by one. The partner that was the well partner had a monitor where he could see his or her partner. every so often when their image flashed up randomly. They'd also attach both partners with all kinds of physiological equipment to measure everything, heart rate, brain waves, et cetera, et cetera. And they discovered, when they collated all the information afterward, something really cool. When the well partner ever sent healing intention to his ill partner, their brain waves started synchronizing, their heart rates started synchronizing, their breathing started synchronizing, their skin conductance, the rate of blood flow to the ends of their fingers, all of this started synchronizing. It was like two bodies became one. So this has a lot of implications about how you're sending intention and what you're sending out there. Because the last strange thing that nobody knows about intention is that your thoughts are a constant broadcast. Remember, we talked about the power thought. We all think, yeah, I get into my meditative state, I send out my power thought. It's the only thing the universe hears. But you're broadcasting 24/7. Remember those biophoton emissions you are sending out at every moment. If your brain is like a television station broadcasting, you're beaming out. You are radio 24/7. And your messages are being sent out and replied to. So the big question to ask is, how come we are such a leaky bucket? Why are we? Because that's what we are. We are leaky buckets. We're sending out all the time because we're sending out thoughts unconsciously. We think we're sending out that positive intention. But just ask yourself, what is your constant broadcast? What's your unconscious broadcast? Is it always, is the house always on fire? Is it always the glass is half empty? Because every thought you hold, all that flotsam and jetsam going through your head, all those judgments you're making at every moment, every last mendacious thought you have, that is getting beamed out to the world, and that is becoming your life's intention. So I wanted to show you how much you're beaming out right now, all right? So I'd like you to say hello to the person right next to you, and hopefully you don't know them. And I want the person to the right here to be set. I want the person to the right to think about what's plaguing them, what's on their mind all the time. What issue are they facing now that they really are pissed off about and are preoccupied with, let's say. And I want you to hold on to your partner. Just say hello for a minute to your partner, and I want you on the right to send that idea of what is preoccupying you to your partner. And partner, I just want you to open up your heart to receive. Okay? So, when you do this, shh. Say hi to your partner for 2 minutes, and then I'm going to play a little music, and then you can send it during that music. Okay? Okay, everybody. Shh. Okay. Now, how many people picked up something of what their partner was sending? Right. Okay. That's how leaky you are. And that's what you're sending out. If you think that you're having a quiet little thought about that coworker you can't stand, think again. They're picking up everything you're sending. Now, the biggest question of all, can we go back and fix the past? Well, there was actually a study about this. There was a guy called Leonard Lebovici who was a big skeptic, an Israeli professor, who wanted to demonstrate that alternative medicine doesn't work. So he decided to design a woo-woo experiment. So he took a group of patients who were very ill with blood infection, blood sepsis, and he put them in two groups. And both got the usual drugs, but one of them, one set, got prayed for. So afterward, he looked over all of their patient records, and he was astonished because it demonstrated that the people who had been prayed for were better in every regard. They had fewer side effects from the drugs. They had fewer complications. They got out of the hospital sooner. They were just better. Now, there was a very interesting kicker to this study. The praying had been done in the year 2000. The patients had been in the hospital in the years 1992 to 1994, 6 to 8 years earlier. Now, what he had done is just randomly took some patient records and sent prayer to one batch of them, and they actually turned out to people, when he examined them, they were actually better in every regard. Now, he published this in The Lancet, thinking this was going to demonstrate you can't use a scientific method to look at alternative medicine. And instead, it was universally determined that, and understood to show that we can go back and fix the past. Now, those pair studies, there are many studies of what they call retro-intention. I've cataloged them all in my book, The Intention Experiment, but I'll share one with you, which is Robert John's studies of all those hundreds of thousands of studies showing that you can affect equipment. The best studies, the most effective studies were done on the equipment 2 or 3 weeks after they'd run, and they demonstrated an effect. So what is going on here? As I asked Robert John once, how do you explain that? He says, simple, take time out of it, and it all makes sense. I go, right, okay. But what he really means is, and what a lot of scientists have done work on, is that we're not fixing the past, but that the future is always affecting the present as it unfolds. It makes complete sense if you understand time is a now, space is a here. All space and all time are all here in some unactualized, energetic present. So, now to the intention experiment. Can it multiply in a group? And this was my big question. So, I began, as I say, in 2007, running experiments. And what I did was put together my readers from all over the world, as I mentioned, with a number of scientists I had met when writing the field and researching the intention experiment. And what we would do is set up a controlled experiment in the laboratory. Now, I wanted to cure cancer. I like the grand gesture. But as my scientist said to me, Gary Schwartz was the first one, psychologist at the University of Arizona, let's start with a leaf. Let's take baby steps. He used to always call me the alien wormhole, who wants to, the alien in contact, who wants to jump into wormholes very impatiently. And he said, we got to build this. We've got to work slowly through animal, vegetable, and mineral. We're proving something that's never been demonstrated before. So we started with seeds and leaves. Now, this is what we would do. We would take 4 sets of these seeds. They're at University of Arizona, Tucson. And they would photograph these, and they would send them to me. And I would run this study whenever I was speaking in front of a group like this. So the first one we did, and what we would do is tell them to send an intention, very specific intention. Our intention is for all the seeds in our target group to sprout at least 3 inches by the 4th day of growing. The scientists wouldn't know what we were doing. They would plant all, and which ones we had chosen. After I gave them the signal, I'd say, we're done. They'd plant all 4 sets of seeds and then measure them after 4 or 5 days. So the first time I ran this, let's go back to this, was in Sydney, Australia, a group of about 700. We sent intention to one of the sets of seeds. They got planted. And only after the study was done, and the the plants had been measured, did I reveal which ones we had sent, which were the target seeds. And we discovered the seeds sent intention grew significantly higher than controls. We ran this 6 more times. Whenever I would be somewhere, large groups, small groups, workshops in Rhinebeck, New York, giant groups of healers in South Carolina, Dallas, Los Angeles, and then over the internet, inviting thousands of my readers to come on board. Every single time we sent intention, the seeds sent, the intention grew significantly higher than controls. We actually ran it 12 times with control studies, et cetera, and we published the study. Now, let's unpack, because we go, yeah, intention works. But let's just unpack what happens here for a second. The seeds, I'm in Sydney, Australia. My audience is there with me. We are sending intention to a photograph. We're not sending intention to the object. The object is sitting in a lab 8,000 miles away, and we've affected it. We've done that over any distance, and we've, as I say, large and small. We've even affected it without having a coherent group. We've had an effect with a group of people scattered all over the globe whose only connection is my internet site. Doesn't that seem weird to you? So, there's some sort of psychic internet that goes on. There's some sort of virtual entanglement that goes on. Now, we moved on from seeds after doing those experiments a number of times and leaves. Started working with water. So we started doing intentions, sending water, trying to change the pH. First trying to change just photonic emissions, tiny little things that change in water, showing changes in molecular structures. Because water connects together. The molecules of water connect together like pieces of Lego. They constantly change. And they're constantly building new structures, depending on the clarity and the purity of the water, think many scientists. So we started doing that. We had some pretty positive effects. And we started changing pH. We had positive effects. So we decided to do a big live experiment with Dr. Masaru Emoto, then alive, in Japan, sending intention to the mother lake of Japan. We took out 2 samples of water. We sent intention to one of them. I had my audience do it, plus we had a photo of it that we put on our internet site so people could do that simultaneously. We moved the pH by nearly a full pH, which is huge. If you changed your pH in your body by that, you'd be dead. So we had a huge response. And think about the implications of a water experiment, because everything on the planet is essentially water. Plants are about 90% water. Human beings are basically a giant water vessel. We're about 80% water. So sending intention to change something in water has big implications for sending intention for human beings. So I was tired of all these baby steps, and I said, nah, I want to do something big and important. Let's lower violence somewhere. So I got together a team of scientists from the University of California at Davis, from University of Arizona, Robert John and Brenda Dunn, formerly from Princeton, and a number of others helping us. And we were also inspired by the studies of the transcendental meditation groups who had looked at the fact that when a critical mass of people are meditating in a particular area, the crime rate goes down. So we asked advice from them as well. So the first place we sent intention to was Sri Lanka, because nobody was thinking about that, and there had been a 25-year war going on. So we thought, this is a good place to do it. And we sent intention there every day for 8 days. And we found a couple of amazing things. Number one, violence quadrupled over the week of our intention, which scared me a lot. And then it plummeted by 74%. But what happened in that week afterward was really shocking, because looking back over the next year and comparing it to, and we compared data from 2 years before, which is one reason we took Sri Lanka. Don't ever try to find injury statistics, casualty rates in a war-torn area. It took me 3 months to find a place that could give me this kind of data. And it was very, very difficult, calling. So we finally found these people who were recording this in Sri Lanka. Anyway, what happened was the government seemed to win some decisive wars that week, the week of our intention, that completely changed the course of the war. They had been losing up till then. After that, they took over the North in a couple of months, and 5 months after that, that 25-year intractable war was over. Did we do this? Short answer, who knows? You know, it could have been any one of a number of variables. In science, if you do one thing like that, it's a clever little trick. If you do many of them, it starts to get interesting. So we decided we have to run this again. But before we did, we started looking at the analysis of what should have happened. This is a University of California at Davis expert in statistics, Dr. Jessica Utz, and she modeled over 2 years what had happened with violence and what should have happened. And here's what happened to us. It should have gone up like that, and instead it didn't. It went way down. So that was interesting. And we also looked at the Global Consciousness Project is running many, many random event generators, all operating all the time, and looking at whether they move off their random course with moments of joy or great collective sorrow. So they've looked at them, for instance, with the death of Princess Diana, and they found that the machines were registering a huge effect. They've looked at it with the 9/11 disaster. That was the biggest effect of all. So Dr. Roger Nelson has also been involved in looking at what's happened with my intention experiments, large and small, and he found that there was a huge deviation off random course just during the 10-minute window every day of our intentions. So this was being felt like a disturbance in the force in machinery all around the world. So I said, we had to do it again. So we thought, right, let's do something for the 10th anniversary of 9/11. And this time I enlisted basically the Deepak Chopra of the Middle East, Dr. Salah al-Rashid, who has tens of thousands of followers all over the Middle East, because I thought, I'm sick of those burning buildings going down. I want a new image here. I want hands across the water. So we both got together, my followers, their followers, and we had Easterners and Westerners all sending intention to southern Afghanistan. And we picked 2 provinces in southern Afghanistan. Now, if you want to get statistics in an American war, do not even try. I called everywhere in America to try to get these statistics. I called the State Department. I called this and I called that. They finally put me through to what is a counter-terrorist unit. Jack Bauer lives in America and doesn't have a listed telephone number, I got to tell you. So I got sent to that, and they were totally freaked out and wanted to know why I wanted to know about violence levels and terrorist activity in Afghanistan and what was my social security number. So I'm on somebody's enemy list now, no doubt. But I finally got the information from NATO and the UN. I got violence data from 2 years before and was able to compare them for 3 to 6 months after our intention experiment. Same thing, 8 days. Civilian, as you can see, the data speaks for itself. Civilian casualties down 37%. Enemy attacks down 12%. Attacks in the Southwest down up to 790%. They even noted on this report, not knowing about anything that we were doing, how unusual it was that these 2 provinces had something so different. So, did we do this? Short answer, no. You know, who knows? Short answer, we could have. We might have, who knows? You got to run it a few more times. So this time we decided to send intention to the most violent place in America, the U.S. Congress. So we decided to send intention to the 2 provinces, the 2 counties around Congress, and to see if we could lower violence levels. Now we did this twice. It was really interesting. June 2012 and September 2012. And look at what happened. The day after we sent this intention, two of the biggest enemies in the Congress, John Boehner and Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House and former Speaker of the House, hugged. They hate each other. So I thought, wow, maybe we're onto something here. So again, this time we waited an entire year after our intention and then looked at what happened. And here's a graph showing that increase in violence, in just violent crime, that's all we were sending intention to, decreased by 33% and bucked its trend. It was on an upward trend. The same thing did not happen with property crime. Property crime went up. But remember, we were only focusing on violent crime. Did we do this? Who knows? We've got to run it a few more times. It sounded interesting. But that's not the most interesting part of the story. The most interesting part of the story is what was happening with the participants. Because I started surveying them, and I'm in the middle of writing a book about what's gone on with them and what is going on with the people in part of my intention groups. There seems to be some sort of space of possibility that gets created when lots of people are thinking the same thought at the same time. Lots of people essentially are praying together for something else, something good. Because here's the biggest secret that no one ever talks about. Intending for someone else works twice as well for you. When you're doing it for someone else, it works twice as well for you. That's my big secret for you. Now, let me show you some of the things that happened to our people. I started surveying the peace attention experiment. I was absolutely shocked to find what they were telling me. They were telling me their lives had completely transformed. Something had totally shifted. They were closer to their loved ones. They were forgiving each other. Their lives were much more peaceful. They had made some sort of amazing life shift. They were even healthier. Something had shifted for them. So I started getting really interested in this. And I wondered, what happens when there are little groups? So in all of my workshops, I started working in little groups as well, and putting people in small groups and having them send intention to somebody else in the group. And we started finding little miracles were happening. First of all, people were healing, spontaneously healing. The lame were walking. I'm telling you, the lame were walking. It was scaring me because, I'm not a healer or whatever. And I started realizing that maybe I'd stumbled on some sort of modality here that was healing people. So we'd send intention to somebody within the group. Let's say I had a woman with an opacity in one eye. She couldn't see. She had cataract that had severely limited her vision. By the next day, it was 80% better. I had a woman who had arthritis and could, she was kind of really crawling to the workshop. And the next day, she bounded down the stairs. I had a woman a couple of months ago who had scoliosis, right? A curvature of the spine. They wrote me afterward to say they had to change. This is a daughter and mother. The daughter wrote me to say, my mother, we've had to change the rear view mirror in her car, the position, because her back has changed so much. I went, whoa, what is going on here? So what we started looking at is, first of all, the energy of that group. And we looked at, with Dr. Konstantin Kurakov, who measures a lot of these things I talked about before, the Russian physicist, he found and Roger Nelson, who was using those random event generators, Roger found, again, a deviation, a very continual deviation from chance using those REG machines when we were running our small intention groups. And Dr. Kurakov found, these are in a group of our people in the group, that's their chakra alignments before. These are their chakra alignments afterward. Something about being in that space of possibilities is healing, is mutually healing, is collectively healing. So there is a sort of mirror effect that I am investigating now. And what's so exciting is I have a university now in America at my disposal. I'm going to keep it quiet right now because I'm writing about it, etc. But we are using these intention groups. We are hooking them up. We're creating an intention group in a prison. We're creating 2 at a university. We're using one intention group to heal a bunch of parents who are feeling guilty because their children are damaged by vaccines. We're trying to do a bunch of different healing things, and we're measuring everything going on with them. Everything. Their immune systems, their heart rate, their EEGs, everything. What is going on here? Because I need to know what on earth is going on here. Because I know something definitely is happening here. So this space of possibilities, this is what we know. This is what is appearing to be the case. There seems to be some sort of change of consciousness. There seems to be some way of breaking down time and space. There seems to be some way of that it removes individuality and allows, through this ecstatic union, some sort of glimpse of the cosmos. Something that we were always supposed to be, I guess. And dramatic healings, dramatic long-term changes, renewed life purpose. People, so many people telling me, I now know what I've been put on this earth to do. So I am just blown away by this. And I've been starting to look at the power of altruism, because that's really what we're talking about. Getting off the self, getting off self-help, going to other help seems to be the power that we don't understand. Now, I've looked at a number of things, and I've looked at the power of working in groups, which I talk about a lot in my book, The Bond, in ways to live the new science. And we found in studies of Oxford rowers, for instance, that when people are rowing together, they have a far higher pain threshold than when they are rowing alone. And when they do things in a group like this, their brainwaves all again start synchronizing. But most fascinating of all is that when people do things like use, instead of affirmations, sports people, they've found, when they use affirmations with we instead of I, as a team, we as a team are going to do well today, not I'm going to play my best. Everybody's individual game gets better. The power of we is so extraordinary that it seems to help create that. Now, here's one other big, big secret I want to let you in on. I want, I get, and I get sick. Okay? This is the scariest part of the I want, I get. There is a study that is so interesting that I just came across. It's a study looking at people who live the good life. People who live a life of pleasure, a life of focusing on improving themselves, and who have all the money they want, and they have all of this, and they have all of that. And guess what? That life of pleasure leads to hugely high inflammation levels. These guys are walking candidates for a heart attack. Who are the people with low inflammation levels? People who have lived a life and are living a life of purpose and meaning. Purpose and meaning, which almost always has something to do with service. Something about getting off of your own self-help raises your game, raises your health. I want for you, and I get. Now, I started looking at, because I'm so blown away by what's been happening with all of this and what I'm continuing to find and catalog, that I started looking for antecedents, and I found something. The Bible has been badly translated. We know this. It's had to go through a number of languages. As you probably know, Jesus was an Essene before, and they had a lot of healing traditions. And one of the things that the Bible always says is he and the apostles prayed in one accord, which is like the most boring way of translating what they actually said, what says in the Hellenic Greek, which is they prayed ecstatically with one voice, like a symphony. And I thought, yeah, maybe he had a healing intention circle. Maybe that's all that I've stumbled onto, something that he was trying to talk about a long time ago. You can try this at home. One of the things to teach yourself about intention is to take something that never happens and to send intention to see what happens. One of the ones I always tell women is ask your partner to bring you flowers if that doesn't happen. I had this situation with one woman over here who said, my husband never gives me flowers. So I said, we'll do that. And so she went with him to a garden center one day, and she sent intention, may he get me flowers, please? And all of a sudden, he goes flying away. They were waiting in the queue. She goes flying away and comes back with a big geranium plant. She says, what was that? He says, it was like a voice inside my head. So now, men, my husband is still working on this one, not successfully. Get your wife to sit down and watch football with you. You can send an intention, see what happens. Or get your kids to make their beds. You know, I'm still working on this, and I've got an 18-year-old, but I never give up hope about intention. So try some of those things at home. Now, before I leave you, I just want to tell you a few things about my books. My latest book, The Bond, I'm working on my new one on the results of all the intention experiments, but my latest book, The Bond, is all about how to live this, how to live beyond I, me, mine. How do we create a new life if we are supposed to be living according to a new science? So it's got many exercises about how to relate differently, how to see differently, how to connect in a group, and there's more or less a handbook for it, how to move beyond competition. They're now considered like a trilogy, and I've got to do an advertisement for myself here. The Field, if you've never read it, it was the Bleep's #1 recommendation for the book you have to read about the new science, and it seems to be the textbook or the book, the rationale for pretty much every alternative modality. I know Eric Pearl talks about it, and in Reconnection, and Richard Bartlett, and Barbara Brennan. Everybody uses it as a textbook. The intention experiment, not just the science of intentions, but also a whole powering up program. How do you do intention best? So that's it, and of course it's our ongoing experiments, and The Bond, of course, how to live according to the new science. So please check them out. I also want to tell you about what doctors don't tell you. Don't forget, that's my other hat, still fighting the good fight. And just wanted to say for the doctors in the audience, we're not targeting you, despite this very provocative title, which we used on purpose to get everybody's attention. We're targeting the pharmaceutical industry. We're saying there's a different way to heal people. And we want to free doctors we want to set doctors free to be the healers they always wanted to be, away from the influence and the bribery and the corruption of the pharmaceutical industry. So we applaud you, doctors, and we particularly applaud the ones that are sitting in this room right now. So, one other thing. We are expanding. We're in 10 languages around the world now, what doctors don't tell you. And we're, of course, expanding my other scientific and spirituality enterprises. And we need some really passionate people who really love what we do. If you love what we do, and it's what you love to do too, and you've got any kind of web-based or publishing experience in all the different areas from marketing to editorial to advertising, come see me, give me your card. I want to hear from you, okay? One other thing, my husband's book, The Untrue Story of You, I'm going to be doing a workshop with him I'm going to be telling you about in a moment. He is written the most amazing book. He was an abused child, psychologically abused, and he completely healed himself by creating his own program, which he basically created a new theory about how the past takes us over like a unwelcome guest, and that our thoughts create the thing. Our thoughts create the thinker. The thoughts think the thinker, which is his radical idea. But he has a whole program for getting over the past that holds you back. So we're putting our act together as a double act, and I'll be telling you about that in a second. I have cards out there. I have an intensive, the only residential I'm running this year is in Costa Rica for a week-long intention masterclass. If you like what I do and you want to learn really how to do intention and how to heal your life, have a card. There's a card out there by my book, so please come and take it. Please come a look, and that's the website if you're interested. We will have a wonderful time, and it's also beautiful there. And here's the workshop we're going to be running with Richard Smith, who runs the Consciousness and Human Evolution conference. We're running a Forgiving Your Past workshop next June, which is overcoming the thoughts and the past that hold you back. We've already run this in the Middle East, and they absolutely loved it. So please check this out. Please keep going on the come on our website or TCCHE's website, and you'll hear all about it very shortly. And do follow me on Facebook. It's pretty lively sometimes with skeptics coming on and us doing all the sorts of things I talked about last evening, and being a little ninja, and I guess being a subversive spiritual activist. That's probably what I am more than anything else. But please come on and check us out. And here's my website, which is going to be under construction. By the way, the skeptics hacked into my intention experiment website, which again became more of a platform, and we used it as more publicity. So what they do, we try to be an Aikido master back with. One final thing to talk to you about. There was a really amazing study in Harvard some years ago that was all about taking the best and the brightest and seeing how their life unfolded. And they were studying them from every area. They took the smartest, the healthiest, all kinds of things like that, and they studied them over 20 or 30 years. And they were a total mess. Many became alcoholics. Many didn't fulfill any kind of potential. The only one who came up from that sewer place of self-interest was somebody who found his path through altruism. So my big message to you, basically, is get off yourself. This is one of the most important times we've ever lived in. This is a time of real spiritual and global crisis. And one of the things that we're sickest about is the fact that we are so preoccupied with ourselves. We're so isolated. And one of the things that I've discovered in a lot of my work is that the power of coming together in tiny, tiny groups. And so one of the things I'm trying to really encourage everybody to do is to understand that we were meant to be part of a bigger group. Always meant. There's so much evidence that people who do things altruistically live healthier lives, lower their stress, and also the power of community, even when there is a huge setback. There was a study of the lowest income earners in the US, and they found that they had no stress as long as they had two things: a strong spiritual attachment of any sort, but more importantly, a strong spiritual community. So if you want to give yourself the biggest self-help boost of all, it's finding a little tribe of some sort. I hope that you can find them in this group this weekend. And if you can't, come onto a like-minded website like ours and be attached. Be attached to a group of spiritual activists and spiritual subversives, because, you know, we have to get beyond the point of just looking out for self-interest. We have to look out for each other. And that is the biggest message that I can leave you with, is it's not about finding that perfect self-help course. It's not about finding that perfect route or that perfect healer for you. It's about you healing somebody else. If you carry someone else, you too will be healed. Thank you very much.
One life, you got to do what you